Hello folks and welcome back to the channel. HeirofCarthage here, and I hope you're ready for some one-on-one action on Total War Rome 2. This is going to be Carthage versus Massaili with a couple of very high-level players and should be a really fun match. Now this is an interesting matchup in and of itself. Carthage and Massaili share some, I would say some of the traits between their factions. Neither one of them is an overwhelming infantry powerhouse. However, that said, we've seen in replays the Desert Legionaries and Desert Cohort are very capable. And I would say probably better than most of the main line that Carthage has. Now, I don't remember the exact price of them, so I can't speak to that. Now, the Desert faction, though, does have some more interesting units. They're going to have these armored Numidian Cavalry. These are a really cool unit in the sense that they're a little bit heavier and have significantly better melee attack than the counterparts that Carthage is going to have access to, unless they're using the noble version. So these are kind of an in-between the noble and in-between the regular, and really are an excellent cavalry overall. We've seen them perform amazingly well in some commanders' battles before, and you can see a couple of them out there. And the Numidian army, at least what's visible so far, is going to include some Desert Vigiles, some light infantry, tribal slingers up front. There's going to be 4 of those. And then a mix, no, not a mix, just legionaries down the main line here. And then in the back, we have some armored Numidian riders. Maybe 4 of those. Now, armored Numidian riders are a heavy shock cavalry. They're going to hit really hard on the charge, and they are going to have a bonus versus large. If they do not get a charge, I would not expect them to trade wonderfully with Carthage's pretty decent medium cavalry, which is going to be their Carthaginian cavalry here. And we're going to see several of those, as well as a noble general. It's an interesting pick here. The Carthaginian noble is really not a good value, but it is an option on where to place your general, and sometimes, depending on what your army's intention is, you might place your general there, despite the fact that it is not a unit you will otherwise see often from Carthage. Now, there are going to be mercenary Cretan archers up front, and then there's going to be some Gallic warriors and Libyan hoplites in a second line, and then a third line is going to be Scutari and Samnites. Scutari are pretty good medium infantry. They don't have a ton of armor, but they do hit pretty good, offensively speaking. Not a ton of damage, but again, a pretty decent offensive unit, especially if they can get into a fight on charge. Now, the Carthaginians using Cretan archers here, and I've had this discussion a lot, and I'm going to continue to have it for those who may be still trying to learn something about the game. In my mind, archers and slingers are 2 different tools, and they are for different reasons. Each one has an advantage over the other. And archers are going to be the quicker damage, and they're probably better in terms of like their arc of fire, so they can fire up and over things. So archers are going to deal their damage faster. They're going to have a better arc of fire. However, the downside of the archers is going to be that their ammunition is a little more limited, and they do not have as much armor-piercing damage. Now, Cretans and other elite units do sometimes have special abilities that modify the armor-piercing damage. You could see heavy shot. So, for instance, I'll pull that up. That gives them extra armor-piercing. They have whistling, flaming, quick reload, which ultimately means yet more damage. So there are modifiers, but as a general rule, archers do more damage faster, and slingers do more armor-piercing damage over a longer period of time, but less damage over a shorter period of time, and they also tend to have more shots. So 25 ammunition. If we go over here and take a look here at the ammunition on the Cretan archers, it's at 15. So you can see that is a big difference. So it's going to be quite a bit different. It's because archers deal more damage, so that's why they have fewer shots. In any case, that is the 2 tools. Like I said, I'll explain them as much as I need to hopefully continue to help people understand that facet of the game. So some people say, well, which one's better? There's not a better or a right. You pick one, and it does the job that you hopefully intend for it to do on the battlefield, right? So the Carthaginian cavalry here are going to be used to counter the armored Numidian riders, and armored Numidian riders are definitely capable in melee, though they don't have a bonus versus large unless they're throwing their javelins. So they won't want to get mixed up with the Carthaginian cav, but again, don't underestimate these guys. Very, very solid cavalry. So we've got I'm going to call them Numidians, Massaili. There's multiple, probably factions that could fit that bill here, but for the sake of the battle, I'm going to be calling the Massaili the Numidians. You have the Carthaginian cavalry trying to pull a... I don't know what... Yeah, the Carthaginian cavalry was trying to pull away from the armored riders and then there was infantry support sent, which is definitely a good call. That Carthaginian cav does not want to take that charge on the chin, and at this point the light infantry is pushing forward, kind of whisks their javelin throw and gets smashed by a Carthaginian cavalry, and that's going to be followed up by Gallic warriors. And then over here, the armored riders are falling back to the support of the desert legionaries. Those legionaries are going to be met head-on by a mercenary Samnite warrior. It'll be an interesting one. If there's no other factors at play there, I'd be curious who would actually win that. But there are other factors at play, because here comes an armored Numidian rider, and there's some Carthaginian cavalry mixed in there as well. The Gallic warriors quickly mop up what was left of the light infantry. It'll be pretty effective, and then these Libyan hoplites are going to be sent in to hold the desert legionaries, while flanked by the Gallic warriors. That might not be a bad 1-2 combo there. There's a lot of armored rider charges going on over here, and Numidia also managed to get some of their armored Numidian cavalry into the back lines to harass the Cretan archers, where they have done a little bit of damage. The Cretan archers, though, do look like they're going to survive this initial cavalry assault, though, and the noble cavalry here is going to push away those armored riders. Not something that you would typically see, but when they do commit to that melee, ouch, look at this, speaking of melee, armored Numidian riders crushing that Gallic warrior, which had a really nice flank position. Show you the effect of shock cavalry in the right scenarios. It's like a pretty close fight between the Samnites and the desert legionaries, and of course there's Carthaginian cavalry trying to finish up the armored Numidian riders, and here is one of the things that I would say that archers are quite decent at, lobbing shots into cavalry. You're going to see the Cretan archers used for just such a thing right here. Now, this will certainly cause some friendly fire into the Carthaginian cavalry, but it will be absolutely devastating to the armored Numidian riders. They are not going to like that one stinking bit, and I do not believe they have a shield, so that is going to be quite painful. Desert Vigiles here being used just to hold up a front line. Here comes the noble cavalry to give Numidia what it has been dishing to Carthage, which is some shock cavalry charges. That Desert Legionary was softened up and now engaged by Samnites. Scutari has come here into the middle, and armored riders are trying to counter the Carthaginian noble general, and then the Carthaginian noble generals are receiving some of the same treatment that the Numidians received shortly here before this by the Cretan archers, and the Cretan archers, by the way, are still dishing out that damage. They have picked yet a new target and are firing their arrows. Carthaginian general is going to intercept this rider, and I imagine we're going to see the Cretans continue to pour fire into that Numidian cavalry, as well they should. If that cavalry is neutralized, then Carthage is going to be in a pretty good position here, I think. Now, that said, the remainder of the Numidian units are still quite dangerous. There's a lot of these cohorts. They are fighting quite well thus far. In fact, it's pretty close between these units. Pretty close indeed. So it seems to be, I would say, a close to even fight in melee. But there's a lot of other factors at play here. There's been cavalry charges, and there's been some missiles and other things, so I don't know that we can make one-on-one decisions based on this. Tribal slingers still targeting the cavalry of Carthage. That's not a bad call. It looks like the Carthaginian cav might just YOLO here. And they're going to die soon enough anyway, and this may not be a bad call to YOLO in here, take as many slingers as they can, and then let the Cretan archers do their damage while the Numidian cavalry is otherwise busy elsewhere. This does look like it's going to be a fairly close fight in terms of how it's going to end, and I do not know how it's going to end. This one will be as much a surprise to me on the ending as it is to you. Let's see, Desert Legionaries here. Yeah, they're going to be absorbing some not-so-friendly volleys there. We got a Scutari holding up here against the Desert Legionary, slowly falling apart, but this Samnite here is doing pretty well. The Scutari, I think, are punching good for their cost here against the Desert Legionaries. And again, I don't know the cost on the Desert Legionaries. They may be getting a slightly better value here, but I would imagine the Scutari match up okay against those units, especially if they come in after a charge is made. Now, there is cavalry left for the Numidians, and this could be a problem for Carthage. They still have archers. I don't know how much ammunition the archers have left, and the slingers are certainly making their presence felt on the battlefield as they unleash volleys into that Samnite warrior. And the armor-piercing nature of the slingers is going to take a massive toll late in this game. Now that Carthage does not have any cavalry with which to counter the tribal slingers, it certainly makes me wonder whether Carthage can survive what Numidia is dishing out. And Carthage may need to try and quickly eradicate the remaining infantry for the Numidians if they want to have a prayer in finishing those slingers, because those slingers probably have a fair bit of ammo left. and it is going to be dangerous. Though I do see the archers falling back, which indicates to me that they do have ammunition, and they wish to spend the rest of it. They're still being assaulted by an armored Numidian rider in the back, and I would say that that puts Carthage at a bit of a disadvantage. However, look at this, the main line collapses in the middle for Numidia, and a small force of Scutari charges forward into the slingers, whose morale drops rather suddenly. Probably the death of the general would be my guess. Indeed, that is the case. So the Numidian general dies. That is going to be big trouble for these tribal slingers, who are not disciplined troops, and will suffer quite the penalty at the loss of their leader, especially when being pursued by Scutari, and now there's a Libyan hoplite pursuing as well, so I think things just turned for the worse for the Numidians, but the battle is not over. Sometimes you will see an army stabilize after that initial general loss, and with these slingers left, if they have a fair bit of ammo, they are still very dangerous units and can do a tremendous amount of damage. I would imagine the archers are out of ammunition, or very near out of ammunition at this point. Looks like near. So Rome 2 does not keep an active ammo count like you'll see in the more modern Total War titles and the stats, so we do not know what is left. Carthage finishes up another infantry unit and sends some mercenary Samnites on the chase against the slingers. One of the slingers shattered with 58 men left and a fair bit of ammo. Again, a major blow to the Messaisli at this late state of the game. This Desert Legionary is going to clean up its fight against the Gallic warriors, and this Desert Legionary cleaned up its fight. So there are still some Desert Legionaries on the battlefield, though they are taking some really unwanted Cretan archer fire. Unless you're Carthage, and then it's very much wanted. Or unless you're a Gallic warrior fighting for Carthage and wondering why they are spraying arrows into your melee before the enemy dies, and wondering whether or not you should have engaged in that mercenary contract with Carthage. So yeah, the Gallic warriors taking that in stride like champs. But yeah, Carthage is going to win this one. I don't see how Messaisli can finish it up at this point. They just don't have the units left to protect those slingers, and they can flee and they can shoot, but I don't imagine that that's going to go on for too long. When this Desert Legionary is caught and destroyed, it is going to spell very bad news for the Messaisli. In fact, they can be shot, and with their backs turned, that will be rather effective, as the shield will offer no block chance when shot from behind. So this is going to force the Desert Legionaries to reconsider their fleeing and turn back towards the Carthaginian infantry line, and that will theoretically lead to their demise, as they will be outnumbered. Carthage is intentionally not engaging its infantry and letting its archers do their work, while the archers, who have spent their ammunition, draw their daggers and now use their lighter weight to assist in the chase of the tribal slingers. Speaking of the tribal slingers, able to do over here what you should do when being pursued 2-on-1, which is use one unit as bait and the other in a fixed firing position. This will either cause your opponent to have to do more micro, or it will allow you to kill their infantry unit that is in pursuit, potentially. But the size of this Samnite unit, I don't know that it'll be easy to be killed, and you now have pressure coming from the Cretan archers, and with this pressure, there is now really no turning around for the Messaisli. They can't use one unit to bait and then turn, so at this point the battle is pretty much over, because they can be forced away continuously, and they won't really ever be able to turn and fire. It is possible they could make enough distance between a heavy infantry unit, turn and fire like this, but it isn't going to be tremendously effective, because it's going to go straight into their shields, at which point they'll be forced to flee, and then if you wait even a moment too long, your unit will be caught and attacked in the rear. You can see this is the case here. It's difficult to do. So this is going to be a costly victory for Carthage against their Numidian neighbors, and sometimes allies, of course, looking into history. So here we are, Carthage and Messaisli squaring off. That was Sol versus Spartacus, two excellent players here. I appreciate them both for participating, and I like both of these factions a lot. They're really fun. The cavalry that comes with Messaisli is really quite nice, and it is kind of a favorite in sub-commanders, as I believe it is fairly cost-effective, so you'll see this faction played there quite often, and they honestly even have a decent infantry pick at that price point, because remember, sub-commanders runs at a lower price point. Now this is a more standard battle that we saw here. Carthage was able to definitely flex some muscle here with the elite skirmishers. Now that is a risk, but Sol was able to protect them, and he was able to use his cheaper cavalry. I say cheaper, they might actually be the same cost. I'm not 100% certain. But he was able to use, I would say, his technically inferior cavalry. Inferior in the sense that, like, head-on, I believe the Messaisili would have been successful against the Carthaginian cavalry, but of course Sol didn't offer them just a straight-up head-on engagement. He was using the support of an infantry line, and of course we saw Spartacus attempt to do the same things, and I thought both players played well here. It was a very close battle that certainly could have gone either way, depending on a few factors. So again, appreciate them both. Hope you all enjoyed this one. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you all soon with some more action in Total War Rome 2.